G'day guys, this is Tier and welcome back to another Fallout 76 build update. This one is sorely needed and you guys have been practically begging for me to release my updated version of the build for the Gleaming Depths update. So here it is in all of its glory. Rest assured guys, this build is just as incredible with all the perk changes. In fact, I'd say it's gotten even more powerful and received a little bit of a buff with all of our new open perk spots we have available, especially with the addition of the 4th star effects. The Dreadnaught has become the ultimate raid runner, an unkillable powerhouse ready to take on the hardest of challenges without even breaking a sweat. For those that are unfamiliar, the Dreadnaught build's purpose is to be an incredibly high damaging monstrosity, having the combat prowess to mow down hordes of enemies and the most powerful of bosses alike in a blink of an eye. While at the same time, we make no sacrifices for our survivability and are essentially unkillable and can withstand the harshest of punishments. However, with all of that said guys, please keep in mind that while this build is the updated version for the Gleaming Depths and it can quite easily take on the raids, as you have no doubt seen in some of my other videos and some of my streams, I will have a more dedicated raid runner build out soon with minute changes specific to the challenges that the Gleaming Depths raid has to offer. Essentially, the raid runner will be a variant of the Dreadnaught so that you can be a more team-focused version of this build, essentially making the Gleaming Depths even easier. And while the main version of this build is bloodied and low health, I will be showcasing a full health variant for those that aren't quite as confident with the playstyle, especially in the raids, so keep an eye out for that one. Before we jump in guys, you may have noticed that this build video is titled as version 3.5. That means this is a build in between builds, simply because I know balance updates are coming and most likely more perk changes will come with it, so I'll be able to perfect this build and playstyle in the near future. Essentially in this video, I will only be focusing on the updated perk changes and the new legendary 4-star effects for this build. I will still be touching on the rest of the build, like the legendary perks, mutations, armor and weapons, just like normal, but only in a lot less detail than I normally would since the information there is essentially unchanged from my video released 6 months ago. Now with all of that explained and out of the way, let's get into the build video and showcase what has changed. Alright, let's start off with the special stats. Over onto our perk card machine, Dreadnaught build will have 10 strength, 2 perception, 10 endurance, 9 charisma, 14 intelligence, 8 agility and 3 luck. This is what you should have at default. And please keep in mind guys, we will be making use of 3 fully leveled up legendary special cards. This is an endgame build, so I fully expect you guys to have at least 3 legendary special cards fully maxed up and leveled up to work with. That will give us 15 extra special points to use in the build. For myself personally, we will be using legendary endurance to bring our endurance up to 15, legendary strength to bring strength up to 15, and then legendary luck to bring our luck up to 8. Technically you can use whatever 3 legendary special cards you want, as long as you switch around your base special stats to accommodate to have the same end result as me. Now when everything is all said and done and you have everything in your build situated, you should have 16 strength, 5 perception, 29 endurance, 12 charisma, 13 intelligence, 16 agility and 11 luck. So no matter what 3 legendary special cards you do choose, you will have to accommodate and switch around your base special stats to have the same sort of end result that I do. Now everything else is boosted here due to what I'll show you later on in the build. But yeah, essentially this is what your special stats should be looking like at the end of the build. Alrighty guys, as far as perk cards go, this is what we will be rocking for the Dreadnaught 3.5. We still have all 3 ranks of Heavy Gunner, giving us 60% extra damage. We have 1 rank of Lock and Load, making our heavy guns reload 20% faster. Bandolier is on because we do carry a lot of ballistic weapons in addition to our energy weapons, so we will be rocking Bandolier, 90% reduced weight for the ammo. We will be taking max rank of Blocker, making all melee attacks do basically nothing to us, 45% less damage, it is a must-have. Perception, we will be rocking max rank of Grenadier. All of our weapons will be having the 2nd star explosive effect, however that is not required. This just makes it have a larger radius and therefore dealing more AoE splash damage to all of the surrounding enemies. Over in Endurance, we saw the most amount of changes with this build. Life Giver has been brought down to 2 points, so we're going to be rocking that in. It's going to give us basically more health than what it did previously, and it's going to cost less, so Awesome, we love that. Next, we will be rocking Iron Stomach. With all of our endurance on this build, this will be giving us over 100 damage and energy resistance for the build, so it's a must-have with all of our endurance. Next, we have Natural Resistance. This will be giving us around 50 to 60, possibly 70 if you take buffs, extra Cryo Resistance, Fire Resistance, and Poison Resistance. So this is also a must-have. Natural Resistance is great. Then we have Thirst Quencher. This will give us around 120 to 150, depending on what buffs you take, extra action points to work with. So while we are not focused on having a high action point count, we're not going to be really utilizing VATS with this build, although we do have that capability. Thirst Quencher does help in a lot of areas, so it is a must-have for the build as well, mainly for Dodgy. It helps keep Dodgy active and well, so Thirst Quencher also a must-have for the build. Then from there we have Vaccinated. Obviously all of those previously mentioned perks only work if you don't have a disease, so Vaccinated will help keep them all active. Essentially with all of our endurance, this makes us have around 60 to 70 to 80% disease resistance, so also a must-have, only worth 1 point, so it is not that big of a hit, only protecting us from diseases, I know, but it's still a must-have because it then helps activate all of these other amazing perks. From there, we have max rank of Bullet Shield. This perk saw a lot of change as well, and now gives us a 20% chance to deflect incoming projectiles for 6 seconds when firing a heavy gun. Basically, you can fire one bullet, and for the next 6 seconds, you have that 20% chance to deflect ranged incoming projectiles. It's amazing. It's basically a souped up version of Ricochet, so this does combine with Ricochet, and we have even more chance to deflect incoming ranged projectiles. It also does work with a lot of the projectiles in the raid, like some venom sprays from the boss and a lot of the Guardian's ranged attacks. From there, the staple of most builds, we have max rank of Fireproof, take 45% less damage from fire and explosive attacks. Starch Genes was not removed from the game, guys, it was just simply moved over to Endurance. It is only worth 1 point now. We will never mutate and lose our chosen mutations. This is a must-have for all builds, so we can keep our chosen mutations for the build. And then we have one flex spot in Endurance. We want to have the most endurance we possibly can, so I have opted to have 15 of the endurance stat. So that leaves us with 1 point to use as you wish. I've chosen to go with 1 rank of Ghoulish simply because this will allow whatever radiation damage I take to heal me. So out in the Wasteland and in some situations in the raid, enemies will be dealing radiation damage, and any rads that do hurt your character will instead heal you. So it's a pretty good perk. We only need rank 1 for it to activate the ability. Must have as well, I think, and also there is no other better option to utilize this remaining flex spot for endurance. Over to Charisma, we have Field Surgeon. This will make all of our Stimpaks and Redaway work far quicker. Next, we have Stranger Numbers, just because I don't want to rely on other players sharing this. This will make all of their mutations 25% stronger. Great perk, and it buffs our character a whole lot. From there, we have Tenderizer, making all of our damage towards enemies deal 10% more damage for 10 seconds. Straightforward, you guys know how this works. Shoot an enemy, then the enemy will be weaker, take 10% more damage. Next up, in a similar situation, we have Suppressor. This is actually fantastic for the build because it helps our teammates as well as ourselves to tank more damage. Every time we shoot an enemy, then that enemy will deal 30% less damage to ourselves or our teammates if they are focusing fire on them. Great perk, must have for the build, especially useful in raids. Next up, we have First Aid. This perk was changed to heal more based on our intelligence. For this build, unfortunately, this is seeing a little bit of a nerf. Previously, when we had it maxed out with 3 perk points, it was healing us 45% more, but now because it scales on intelligence, our intelligence is a bit lower than I would like on this sort of build, so now it is only healing around 23 to 25 to 27% more health, which is not bad, but it's still not as great as it was, so unfortunately that has seen a little bit of a nerf. Then next up we have Stabilized. We are using Power Armor, so this is a must-have. While in Power Armor and using heavy weapons, we will break through 45% more armor, and our guns will be a lot more accurate. Next, we have Batteries Included. This was changed and is now worth 2 perk points, leaving us a little bit more wiggle room in the build. So now it's just a lot more efficient with your perk points, still doing the same amount, reducing all energy weapon ammo by 90%. Now this is a Bloodied build in general, so you can use it in endgame boss situations, daily ops, expeditions, just the regular Wasteland out and about. You can also take it into the raids. I have videos on my channel, me beating this raid as a bloodied character. It is possible, it is just requiring a lot more skill and focus than it normally would if you were full health. So, if you are struggling with that, I understand. I will have a full health version of this build out shortly, don't worry. But yeah, for this build in particular, the generic 3.5 version of the Dreadnaught build, we will be bloodied. So Nerd Rage we will be taking, making us deal 20% more damage, give us 40 damage resistance, and we have 15% faster AP regen while we are below 20% health. Next up, like I said, we are using explosive effects on our weapons, and we can also use explosive weapons in general like auto grenade launchers and Fat Men if you wish. Using that, we would need this perk. Making all of that deal 60% extra damage. It is a must-have and helps us dish out a lot more extra damage, especially if you are using weapons like the Gauss minigun. Anyway, into agility, we have max rank of Dodgy, making us avoid 30% of incoming damage for the cost of 30 action points per hit. Great tanking perk, unfortunately it does drain our AP quite a lot. If you are taking buffs and you have faster AP regen, you won't really notice the Dodgy draining your AP, so it's essentially just free damage reduction. From there we have max rank of Adrenaline. We want the most damage we can possibly do on this build, so after every kill we gain 10% extra damage, maxing out at 60% after 6 kills, lasting for 30 seconds and refreshing on kills. Obviously in certain situations against bosses, this perk will be kind of useless because there aren't adds, like the final boss in the Gleaming Depths and the snake fight. There's no adds to shoot at, so you could swap that out for something else there, but for most of the game, Adrenaline is going to be very useful. Over into luck, we have max rank of Bloody Mess, giving us 15% extra damage. Great perk to have, and it is more easily slotted in now that a lot of the other perks in here have been reduced down in cost. Speaking of which, Ricochet. This perk is now worth only 1 point and is better than ever. Essentially now it is based on your luck. Before at max rank it was giving us an 18% chance to deflect. Now with this character's luck it is giving us around an 11% chance to deflect, but that doesn't matter because we have bullet shield, so we have 11 plus 20, we've got a 31% chance to deflect. All in all, it is a buff for the build, but the Ricochet perk was also changed a little bit with how it functions. It now no longer protects you 100% from the incoming deflected damage. Now it only protects you from 50% of that incoming damage. So when this perk procs, same with bullet shield by the way, you will take 50% of the damage that you otherwise would. And now 100% of that damage will be sent back to the target with Ricochet. However, there's a little caveat. When you are in power armor, this perk will get a little buff, and we absolutely are in power armor for this build. So while you're in power armor, that 100% reflecting damage gets boosted to 200%. So essentially while you're in power armor, every time an enemy shoots at you and this perk procs and it deflects back at the enemy, you will be dealing double damage back to them. From there we have a little bit of a weird option for you guys. You have two choices here. You can either do 4-leaf clover or you can do junk shield. Both of these perks were changed and now they are both worth 1 point each. Firstly, I'll cover 4-leaf clover and why this is a valuable option for the build. Power armor builds in general are not very accurate in VATS, so it's hard to build up your critical meter. But when you do, that critical strike deals a lot of damage, especially in the raids when you're trying to VATS target the weak spot on the Guardian and the Terror. Ideally for that you would want someone to share concentrated fire, or maybe you could slot that in 2 points in perception. Anyway, you're going to be missing a lot on this build because it is unoptimized for VATS, so 4-leaf clover will help mitigate that and it will build up your critical meter based on every time you miss a shot. Then from that, when you do hit the critical, it'll start a chain reaction where then every following shot will be a lot more likely to hit due to concentrated fire, and then you should be able to hit the target pretty successfully and you shouldn't miss a whole lot from there. So yeah, that's why 4-leaf clover is a valuable option. The other viable option is junk shield. This now gives you resistances based on your luck and the amount of junk you are holding. So firstly, our character doesn't have that much luck. We have about 11, give or take a few depending on if you're on a team. So right there, that will give us maybe 10 damage and energy resistance respectively. We can max that out to give us 102 damage and energy resistance if we carry a certain amount of junk. I've tested it out and I found that we can hit our luck and junk cap that this will give us for resistances if we hold 100 legendary modules. Now I want you to hold legendary modules because they don't weigh that much. Like a whole stack of 100 will only weigh 15 pounds. And when you die, you don't actually drop the legendary modules. It doesn't act the same way other pieces of junk do, so you don't lose your legendary modules if you die while holding them. If you want to do that, you can utilize your legendary modules as a way to better protect yourself. And 100 extra damage and energy resistance is nothing to sneeze at. It's actually quite valuable, especially when it's added on top of everything else we've got going for us on the build. Everything just synergizes well together and we are very protected and extremely tanky. So yeah guys, this is kind of a little flex spot here. You can do whatever you want here with this one remaining point in luck. Personally, I would recommend either Junk Shield or 4-Leaf Clover for separate reasons. Maybe you could utilize it some other way. You could slot in Curator to make your bobbleheads and magazines last twice as long. You could bring that over to Charisma and use rank 1 of Team Medic. You could bring it over to Agility and use rank 1 of Action Boy. The choice is up to you, but for me, I think that Junk Shield is the way to go and hold 100 legendary modules. As you can see right here, we have 11 luck. Combining that with holding 100 legendary modules, that gives us a grand capped total of 102 energy and damage resistance. If we hold more junk, that number will not increase. However, if we do increase our luck, then that number will then increase and the cap will be raised a little bit. But for right now, for this build, most of the time, you will be capped out at 11 luck. Finally, the last perk of the build, max rank of 1-gun army. It's actually very useful in this build and in the raid. We're going to get a 12% chance to stagger and a 12% chance to cripple a limb. There's a lot of reasons you want to be crippling limbs in this game, in the base game, but even more reasons you want to be crippling limbs in the raid. Crippling stuff and dealing cripple damage will help deal extra damage to the Guardian's shield generator. And when it comes to the Terrorfight, the snake, you want to be crippling parts of its plates so you can then stun it and deal extra damage to its eyes. Among many other reasons, 1-gun army is going to be very useful for us. So yeah, that is the complete explanation for all of my perks on the Dreadnaught build. Now let's move over to legendary perks. So as I explained, we have max rank of legendary strength, luck, and endurance for this build. You can use whatever combination of 3 legendary specials you want, as long as you get the same end result of special allocation that I have, you will be fine. For the other perks, we have Far-Flung Fireworks. I know this perk is not that liked amongst some of you. I like having extra AoE damage and it's a 20% chance to deal that extra AoE damage. However, in the raids, this is not that useful. I would only use Far-Flung Fireworks in the regular game, maybe in regular boss fights. For the raids, I will take out Far-Flung Fireworks and use Funky Duds. So that would be my replacement because poison damage is especially hectic in the raid. So yeah, having Funky Duds slotted in for a lot of the raid, giving us 200 extra poison resistance, will drastically increase our chances of survival in the raid against a lot of the bosses. So consider using that instead of Far-Flung Fireworks if you do take this build into the raid. From there, we have Power Armor Reboot. At max rank, this gives us a 40% chance to auto-revive and just simply not die when we would have otherwise died. So if you make a mistake during the raid and you don't heal through some damage, this gives you a 40% chance to not atone for your mistakes and you just won't simply die. I found this perk especially useful in the drill fight. If I do get caught off guard and I get one hit by the Mole Miner Stalker, that's a 40% chance to not die. I also found this very useful in the Ultrasight Terror fight against a snake. If I make a mistake in there and I don't heal through some incoming poison damage, then it will keep me alive. However, for the Guardian fight at the start of the raid, I do consider swapping that out, or maybe swapping out Funky Duds for Electrical Absorption. Since that robot does deal a lot of energy damage, this perk is worth slotting in. Gives you a 20% chance that energy damage will recharge your Power Armor core and restore health. So essentially, every single laser projectile the Guardian fires in that first boss fight has a 20% chance to heal you, which will obviously drastically increase your survival, and you will feel far tankier in that boss fight. Then finally, we have Taking One for the team. This is an absolute must-have for all of the game, including the raids. You want this perk no matter what, you and all your team want this perk. Enemies will be attacking you, so this will be proccing 24/7. Essentially, anytime an enemy does attack you, that enemy takes 40% more damage. 40% extra damage is a lot in this game, so we want that active all the time. Even better if all of our teammates are rocking this, so this is constantly proccing from other people. But even more so, we want it on ourselves. The Dreadnaught is a tank build. We want to be in the fight, we want to be close to the enemies, we want everything to be attacking us because we can take it. We can heal through everything, we can tank everything, we want enemies to be attacking us so that this can be proccing 24/7 and everything will be taking larger amounts of damage because of it. So yeah guys, that is the legendary perk setup for the build. Obviously there is some variance depending on what part of the raid you are doing. If you're just playing the game normally and not doing a raid, I recommend that you use the build like this, taking one for the team, Farflung Fireworks and Power Armor Reboot. When you're doing the raid and you're at the Guardian fight, I recommend you use these 3 perk cards. And then for the rest of the raid after the Guardian fight, when you're fighting the Mole Miners, the Crystals, and the Ultrasight Terror, I recommend that your perks look like this. Next up, we have the mutations for the Dreadnaught build. This is a Bloodied build, so we will be taking Adrenal Reaction. This will reduce our HP pool by 50. However, that doesn't matter because with changes to Life Giver and all of the endurance we're going to be using on the build, that gets boosted straight back up, and you can see down there on the bottom left, our HP of 551 is no bother. Adrenal Reaction will also boost our damage up by a substantial amount. At max, it will cap out at 63% extra damage. From there we have Bird Bones. This will make us fall to the ground 65% slower. It will reduce our strength by 4 and increase our agility by 5. The main reason we have Bird Bones is to avoid the annoying Power Armor Superhero landing. That landing has gotten me killed more times than I can count. So this mutation is a must-have. The reduction to strength doesn't really matter, and the addition of the agility doesn't really matter either. Since we're in Power Armor, that reduction to strength doesn't actually affect us. Power Armor brings our strength right back up, and we're not particularly using any agility for anything in the build. So like I said, the main reason we have Bird Bones is to avoid that superhero landing. Next up we have Carnivore. I've updated it from Herbivore. I just didn't feel right using this build with Herbivore. Maybe if I was more dedicated to VATS with this build, then Herbivore would make sense. However, I am not. The purpose of this build is to tank, and a lot of those meat dishes do give us extra health, extra defense, and a plethora of other bonuses. So yeah, Carnivore is a must-have for this build. So Carnivore will increase the benefits of all meat dishes by ×2, and then by ×3 if you're using Stranger Numbers while on a team. Next up we have Chameleon. If we are ever outside of Power Armor, then that just makes us invisible and gives us a little bit of damage resistance while we're standing still. Not a great mutation, you don't need it, you can go without it. I just have it just because. Next up we have Electrically Charged. This gives us a 40% chance to deal 32 energy damage to melee attackers. Not massive, but it's something. We're going to be getting attacked quite frequently, so having a 40% chance to deal damage back to them without us having to lift a finger is quite nice. Next we have Herd Mentality. Without Stranger Numbers, this is going to increase all of your special by 2. With it, it increases all of your special by 3. So this is huge, especially when we want all of the endurance we can possibly get. Next up we have Marsupial, the standard for all builds in the game. This is going to increase your carry weight by 25, increase your jump height massively by 400%, and reduce your intelligence by 4. This is very useful for a lot of situations, including in the raids. You'll want to be jumping up to higher ground to get tactical advantages over the enemies, and the increase to carry weight is just a must-have. It also helps offset the reduction in strength from the Bird Bones mutation as well. Then we have Speed Demon. This will max out our movement speed up to 25%. This is the absolute cap. You cannot move faster than this, so don't even try. No other buffs will stack with Speed Demon. It maxes you out completely. Speed Demon will also increase our reload speed by 40%. Stacking that with rank 1 of the Lock and Load brings us to 60% with our heavy guns. So that is just a huge bonus. We don't need to invest too many points into the Lock and Load perk because of the Speed Demon mutation, which is great. Also, while you're moving around, it will increase your Hunger and Thirst drain by 50%. That is the negative, but it doesn't really matter that much because Perfect Bubblegum exists, so we can offset that entirely. Then finally, we have Unstable Isotope. This gives us a 10% chance to deal 25 fire and 120 rads to melee attackers. Again, like Electrically Charged, it's not much, but it is something. So all up, we have a 50% chance for something to happen, and we can deal a little bit of blowback damage to melee attackers, which I will take. Also, a bonus with Unstable Isotope, when it does proc, it will deal radiation damage to you, which will then heal you because of the perk Ghoulish. So that's just another reason why I rock Ghoulish. Every time Unstable Isotope procs, it will heal me. It's nothing you should rely on, and it's not that great, but it is something, like I said, nonetheless. So yeah, those are all the chosen mutations for the build, guys. Now let's move on to weapons. So guys, heavy gunners have a lot of options when it comes to weapons. We've got a lot of great weapons we can choose from. However, the main big three are going to be the Gauss minigun, the Gatling plasma, and a flamethrower of some sort. These 3 weapons will be your absolute go-to and best performing options for the build. They deal the most sustained damage per second and the most damage per shot. They're reliable, they break slowly, they have a lot of ammo capacity, and they're just really easy to use. So far, my favourite one has to be the Gauss minigun. You can also have other weapons on backup like Gatling lasers, 50 cal machine guns, pepper shakers, plasma casters, cremators, auto grenade launchers, LMGs, Gatling guns, and miniguns. You can use all of these sort of weapons just as well. However, the performance and the end result is not going to be beating things like Gatling plasmas, flamers, and the Gauss minigun. So yeah, those top 3 are definitely your best options. As far as legendary effects go, you may have noticed a little trend here. Every single one of my weapons is bloodied, explosive, and reduced weight. Because I'm a bloodied build, we need the bloodied effect. That will increase our outgoing damage by a factor of how low health we are. Ideally, we want to be sitting below 20% health, and that should be netting us around 80% extra damage, which is huge. If you don't want to play bloodied, then anti-armor is your next best option. Now, the explosive effect is huge here. We want that 20% extra AoE explosive damage, which also gets boosted by Demo Expert, as I explained earlier. Additionally, it's even better on the Gauss minigun. As you can see, we have the bottom effect here, bullets exploding for 15% weapon damage. That does stack with our second star effect. So all up, we are dealing around 35% extra explosive AoE damage, all of which gets boosted by Demo Expert and Grenadier. So yeah, it is a must-have. Gauss minigun is probably one of the best performing weapons in the game right now, and it's what I'll choose to use as your main weapon for this build. Now, alternative options for the second star, obviously if you're using a flamer type weapon, explosive is not going to be working. So I would highly recommend you chuck on the rapid, 25% faster fire rate effect instead. That will greatly increase your DPS, making you just incinerate and burn enemies' health bar down to nothing. And if for whatever reason you really don't like the whole explosive effect thing we've got going on here with the Dreadnaught, feel free to replace that second star explosive effect on all of the other weapons with the faster fire rate effect as well. That's also completely viable. It will increase your DPS a substantial amount, but you will be losing out on damage overall. The explosive second star effect is the best meta option for damage if you want the highest DPS setup. Additionally, a third option is now available to heavy gunners. As I said, for third stars, we can now actually use heavy weapons in VATS. So it might be beneficial to use the vital second star effect and deal 50% extra critical damage with our shots. That will be best suited for a fully min-maxed VATS using heavy gunner build, which I will have coming out in the future. For the Dreadnaught, I still recommend you go with the explosive second star effect. As for the third star, weight management is kind of a problem for a lot of you guys. We don't really need to use any more weight reduction perks on this build besides Bandolier or the new updated batteries included perk. We don't need to rock Through Hiker, we don't need to rock Bare Arms, we don't need to rock anything else on this build because our weight management is in tip-top shape, all because our very heavy weapons have that reduced 90% weight effect. Now obviously that doesn't help us in combat, but realistically the third star slots for heavy weapons leave a lot to be desired. All we could do here is maybe slot in 15% faster reload, or potentially now that a lot of the heavy weapons have had a change and reduction to AP cost, we could use less VATS cost third star effect and use these heavy weapons a lot more effectively in VATS. That is also an option. So, you have a choice here. You can either do exactly what I'm doing and use 90% reduced weight for all of your heavy weapons, which will greatly benefit you. As you can see, my weight down there is only 194 out of 355. My weight management is no problem at all. Or you could opt to only carry a few heavy weapons, just the ones you want, and you could use the 15% faster reload third star effect or the 25% less VATS cost effect, and then maybe you can try and slot in Bare Arms or something else to help with your weight management. Anyway guys, I've spoken about all of the weapons and the first, second and third star effects. Now let's take a look at the 4th star effects and what you should consider putting on your weapons. Alright guys, here are all the 4-star options for our heavy guns. The options here are a little bit slim in my opinion when it comes to heavy guns. You could go with Polished, which will give you up to 60% extra damage. However, to achieve that extra 60% damage, you will have to make use of the Weapon Artisan perk, and over repair your weapon by 200%. That requires a lot of finagling and micromanaging of your gear, so it is annoying, but you can do it. You just have to make sure you over repair your weapon every single time you want to deal maximum damage. And after every shot, that damage that it gives you from polished will be going down, because obviously it's based on your item condition. Every shot you do will reduce your condition, which will reduce your damage. So I'm a bit on the fence with polished. The next best option is probably bullies for the damage side of things. This will give you 50% extra weak point damage if you're just free aiming outside of VATS. If you're using VATS, then obviously this is no bueno. You will want a different option there. But for the free aim heavy gunner playstyle, this is actually probably the best option. Then we have conductors. This is also a fantastic option if you do opt to use your heavy guns with VATS. This will make every single critical hit restore 5% of your health and AP. For the tank type of build, we will be able to stay alive and tank a lot more shots than we normally would if we use this perk and use it efficiently. So yeah, for the large majority of the heavy weapons, what I just said applies to them. However, for things like flamethrowers, cremators, and things like Gatling plasmas that can have a fire receiver added onto it, we have the Pyromaniac's 4-star effect. When a combat target is burning, you deal 50% bonus damage. Obviously, flamethrowers, cremators, Gatling lasers, and Gatling plasmas with the right receivers can deal fire damage and make targets burn. So that is basically a guaranteed 50% extra damage. Pyromaniacs is a fantastic combination with those weapons if you wish to use those sort of receivers or those sort of flamethrower type weapons. But yeah, for the vast majority of your heavy weapons, I'm going to go with either polished or bullies as the go-to 4-star option when it comes to damage. Next up, we have the power armor. So it is instrumental to pick the right power armor type and the right legendary effects for your power armor to become the powerhouse that you see before you in my videos. The Dreadnaught build is only the monstrosity it is because of the right combinations. So let's find out what my top picks are for armor, and then we will discuss a little bit about alternative choices you can make. So when it comes to the default power armor that you would be using in regular day-to-day activities in the game, be that taking on boss fights, daily ops, expeditions, just walking around the raceland killing things, or maybe you want to take on the raids, the best defense armor is T65 and Hellcat. You can use either one of these and your results will be pretty much identical. T65 will net you the most damage, energy, and radiation resistance out of all of the power armor suits, so overall that is the best suit defense-wise. However, Hellcat does have a unique effect that reduces all of your incoming ballistic damage by 2% per piece, including the helmet. So overall, when you're specifically being damaged by ranged ballistic weapons, Hellcat does slightly edge out and give you a bit more protection. Additionally, if you're not too fussed about being as tanky as you possibly can, you could rock Strangleheart, as that will give you a little bit of extra damage per second. It will add poison attacks to all of your weapons, and also a poison cloud around you that will damage nearby targets. So while Strangleheart does protect you slightly less than Hellcat or T65, you will be dealing more damage, so that is also a fantastic option. Another fantastic option specifically for the raids, if you really are struggling in there against the Ultrasight Terror or maybe some other parts of the raid, you will want to use Union Power Armor, as this does offer you a bonus 150 poison resistance as a set bonus. Additionally, it gives you 75 carry weight, but that's not really the main takeaway from using this armor. Overall, you will be slightly less tanky with Union Power Armor, but you will be better off against the Ultrasight Terror and other poison attacks if you use Union Power Armor. In fact, if you really are struggling and you find yourself dying very often against the Ultrasight Terror, I do recommend whacking on a good God Roll set of Union Power Armor. However, if you have seen my streams and you've seen my videos, you'll know that I am not really that bothered by the poison attacks. I'm not using Union Power Armor, I'm sticking with my T65, and I'm even doing it bloodied. I'm completing these raids bloodied, and the poison damage is not taking me out. So, all thanks to Funky Duds and natural resistance, I feel like I have enough poison resistance to take on the Ultrasight Terror and the raid as a whole, safely and easily with my trusty T65 Power Armor. Like I said, if you find yourself struggling, you might find better use out of Union. However guys, with all of that said, there is a new contender. The raids brought a brand new set of Power Armor called the Vulcan Power Armor. This is probably going to be the new best power armor set in the game, simply because it has a brand new slew of modifications and a fantastic power armor set bonus. You regenerate your AP 25% faster, and your fusion core duration lasts 25% longer. So, the niche for this power armor is ideally you're supposed to use it in VATS. So that gives us a brand new playstyle to utilize thanks to this power armor. The Vulcan power armor works best if you use it in combination with a fully optimized VATS orientated heavy gunner. Okay, like I said, I recommend the T65 above all else for this build in particular. Obviously, there are situations where you may want to use a different set if you're doing something super specific, or maybe you're struggling in the raid. That's fine, use whatever power armor set you want for that specific situation. When it comes to legendary effects though, it is pretty much the same for this build. No matter what power armor type or model you choose, I will recommend that you get the same legendary effects on all pieces. For the first star, we will want a full set of overeaters. This gives us 6% more damage reduction per piece, maxing out at 30% for a full set, as long as our thirst and hunger meters are full. Again, we can keep that full simply by eating perfect bubblegum, or by staying on top of it and holding purified water and some food buffs. This is very valuable for our survivability. Overeaters is the best option for the first star. It is way better than bolstering and way better than vanguards. From there, for the second star, we will actually be using +2 to endurance for the whole set. This will give us 10 more endurance to work with, which means we get 50 more HP. Now, getting 50 HP alone is already a great reason to use the endurance second star effect. However, thanks to these changes with the endurance perks, we get a slew of other bonuses thanks to Iron Stomach, Natural Resistance, Thirst Quencher, and Vaccinated. So yeah, we aren't just using it for the extra health, we're using it for overall a more tankier build. +2 to endurance is stacked with this build, and it gives us a lot of extra bonuses. From there, we will be picking a full set of Sentinels. While we are standing still, a 75% chance to reduce your incoming damage by 75% is massive. This will be the big kicker that keeps us alive in a lot of situations that otherwise would have killed us. So yeah guys, for the first, second and third star, this is what I would recommend for all of your sets of power armor for the Dreadnaught build. Now let's take a little look at the 4-star effect. So when it comes to 4 stars, we have 4 viable tanking options that I would recommend. Firstly, and would probably be the one I would pick out of all of them, would be Reflective. This will grant us the ability to return 10% of damage received from an enemy back towards them. Obviously this stacks per piece up to a maximum of 50%. And this is not chance based. Every single ranged attack you receive, 50% of the damage you take will bounce straight back at the enemy that shot at you. This is incredible for 2 reasons, tanking and damage output. If the enemy that's attacking you is dealing 50% of its own damage back at itself, you're going to see enemies just dying around you, dropping like flies. So yeah, Reflective is probably my top pick for this build. Followed closely though, we do have Rejuvenators. This will grant you the ability to slowly restore you and your teammates' health and action points within a 50-foot radius. So the way it works is every piece will allow you to restore 1 HP and 1 AP per second. So a full set of this, every single second you will be restoring yourself and teammates that are close by 5 health and 5 action points per second. The health portion of this is huge, and a full set of this will basically negate most incoming damage. Because we're so tanky, a lot of the incoming damage we have that is actually hurting us is very minimal and in the low digits of numbers. So if we are also restoring a low digit of number every second, we're basically negating all of the enemy's progress on our health bar. Also, the AP restoration effect is amazing. It works a little bit differently than normal for the reason that it is persistent. That means that it works while you're using VATS and it works while you're sprinting. So yeah, Rejuvenators is another top choice. From there we have Tankies. If we are specifically going against regular damage, then this would probably be the best choice. So the Tankies effect works like this. As soon as you're standing still and you are attacked, then for the next 10 seconds you will gain 200 damage resistance. And obviously this stacks per piece, so you can have up to 1000 extra damage resistance for 10 seconds. That is huge and will make you incredibly, well, tanky. Obviously there is also a 20-second cooldown, so it is a 50% uptime, 10 seconds on, 10 seconds off. However, if you are looking for something that is a little bit more of an all-rounder, then Aegis is probably the last pick I would recommend for you guys. So Aegis gives you 50 extra physical and energy resistance, 20 extra poison and cryo and fire resistance per piece. So with a full set, you will have 250 extra physical and energy resistance, and also 100 extra poison, cryo and fire resistance thanks to a full set of Aegis. But not only that, this also applies to you and your teammates that are close by, within 50-foot radius. So yeah, Aegis is the best all-rounder protecting effect, I think, when it comes to all of the different types of resistances, and it's also great for a group play-centric tank. So yeah, those are my top picks for the 4-star effects on your power armor. Number 1, we have Reflective. Number 2, we have Rejuvenators. Number 3, we have Tankies. And number 4, we have Aegis. As you can see here, personally, I will be going for a little bit of a split here. I will be going for 3 pieces of Reflective. On my legs, I've got pieces of Reflective, and then my torso, I also have Reflective. Then for the arms, I will go for 2 pieces of Rejuvenators. So yeah, I'm going for a split, 3 pieces of Reflective and 2 pieces of Rejuvenators for my power armor on the Dreadnaught build. So yeah, that is what I will be picking for my 4 stars. Let me know in the comments what you will decide on for yourself. And there we are guys, the complete and updated 3.5 version of the Dreadnaught build. All prepped and updated, ready for the Gleaming Depths update. Once again, the purpose and min-max objective of this build is to become as tanky as humanly possible, while retaining our maximum possible damage output. We are an unstoppable powerhouse, and not even a giant snake can put us down. Reminder as well guys, that this build is simply an in-between update to the Dreadnaught build, and is not super optimized for raids specifically. I will have a separate build video, which is a separate variant of the Dreadnaught, out later on for that exact purpose. So keep an eye out for that one. In saying that though, this build is more than capable of going into the Gleaming Depths and wiping the floor with the bosses within. If you need to return to this video while you're in the process of building this character for yourself, please don't hesitate both to check out the timestamps and the Nukes and Dragons build planner written guide. Both can be found in the description. Also, check out my build playlist. I've got heaps more min-max builds that you guys should check out. Anyways, that's it for me guys. I sincerely hope you guys can utilize this build and slay the Gleaming Depths. That's all guys, happy hunting. Let's roll the outro. That's going to do it for me. A massive shout out to all of my channel members. You're all legends, and thank you for your continued support on the channel. If you like what I do here and you'd like to support me further, then consider becoming a member or check out my merch store. We've got a lot of great designs and benefits, so be sure to check that out in the description. And while you're down there, chuck me a follow on my other social medias and join my Discord. Subscribe if you're new and like the video if you've enjoyed. I've been Tia, and I'll catch us in the next one. Welcome to Valhalla.